The night air felt heavy on my skin as I heaved open the back door of the Obsidian, that ritzy lounge where I'd been slinging drinks for the past 8 months. My feet were already screaming, and my shift hadn't even officially kicked off. The alley reeked of rain-soaked concrete and stale cigarettes, a smell I'd grown tragically fond of during my nightly pre-work ritual of stealing my nerves. Just 6 hours, I muttered to myself, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. 6 hours of plastered-on smiles, dodging grabby hands, calculating every single tip against tomorrow's looming daycare bill. 6 hours before I could finally crawl back into bed with my sleeping daughter, Lily. The crushing weight of single motherhood was like a physical burden on my shoulders. At 27, I never pictured myself raising a 4-year-old all alone after her good-for-nothing father vanished with most of our savings, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a pile of broken promises. Just thinking about him made my jaw tighten. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp October air fill my lungs before squaring my shoulders and heading inside. The Obsidian wasn't your average watering hole. Tucked away in the heart of the financial district, it catered to men who measured their worth in overflowing stock portfolios and flashy foreign sports cars. The interior was all dark, polished wood, amber mood lighting, and ridiculously plush leather. A place where million-dollar deals were brokered over crystal tumblers filled with aged whiskey, where the obscenely wealthy came to see and be seen. "You're cutting it close, Ellie." Marco, the floor manager, called out as I hustled through the staff entrance. His eternally tired eyes swept over me, taking in my appearance. "Table 7's been asking for you." I glanced at the clock, still 3 minutes early. Table 7? I didn't even know I had regulars. Marco's hardened expression softened ever so slightly. He had a soft spot for me, probably because I never called in sick, not even when Lily had that nasty flu last winter. "Corner booth. Always reserved on Tuesdays and Fridays. Mr. Castellano." There was something in the way Marco said the name, a slight drop in his voice, a flicker of warning in his eyes, that made my skin crawl. I definitely noticed that reserved booth before. It sat partially hidden behind an ornate partition, offering a perfect, unobstructed view of the entire lounge while remaining discreetly shadowed. I'd caught glimpses of the men who occupied it. Expensive suits, perpetually serious expressions, hushed conversations that abruptly ceased whenever I got within earshot. "Is there something I should know?" I asked, tying my apron securely around my waist. Marco hesitated for a beat. "Just give him your best service, Ellie. He tips well." He paused, then added, "And don't ask too many questions." That last bit of advice wasn't exactly necessary. I'd perfected the art of blending into the background years ago, especially after Ryan took off. I became whatever people expected me to be: efficient, pleasant, and utterly forgettable. I took orders, delivered drinks, and vanished until I was needed again. It was safer that way, a whole lot easier to keep my head down and focus on what really mattered: making enough money to give Lily the kind of life she deserved. As I stepped onto the floor, the Obsidian was already buzzing with its usual crowd of high rollers. Piano music drifted through the air, mingling with the low murmur of conversations and the occasional burst of forced, restrained laughter. I made my way toward the corner booth, notepad in hand, a professional smile plastered on my face. I felt him before I even saw him. It was a weird sensation, like the air pressure had shifted, like the room's entire energy had suddenly been sucked toward one single point. When I finally looked up, my practiced smile faltered for a split second. 4 men occupied the booth. 3 of them were clearly security. Broad-shouldered, constantly scanning the room with vigilant eyes, sporting almost imperceptible earpieces. But it was the 4th man who completely captivated my attention. He couldn't have been older than 35, with dark hair cut with almost surgical precision, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. His suit was undoubtedly bespoke, the kind of quality that whispers rather than shouts. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch in my throat. Dark and intense, observing everything with such laser-like focus that I felt strangely exposed as his gaze locked onto mine. "Good evening, gentlemen," I managed, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. "My name is Ellie. I'll be taking care of you tonight. The 3 security men barely acknowledged me, but the 4th, Mr. Castellano, I presumed, studied me with unsettling intensity. Up close, I noticed other details. A faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the subtle gleam of an expensive watch partially concealed by his sleeve, the scent of something woodsy and exclusive that seemed to cut through the ambient smells of the bar. Ellie, he repeated, my name sounding foreign and unfamiliar in his deep voice, tinged with what sounded like a subtle Italian accent. Is that short for something? The question caught me completely off guard. Patrons rarely asked for my name, let alone inquired about its origins. Eleanor, I answered automatically. A slight smile played on his lips. Eleanor, he said, as if testing the sound of the name. Bring me a Macallan 25 neat. I jotted down the order, along with the other requests, all top-shelf whiskeys or bourbons, and turned to leave. And Eleanor? I paused, glancing back over my shoulder. Take your time, he said, his eyes holding mine for a beat longer than was comfortable. I'm in no rush. Something about his unwavering gaze made my pulse quicken, a warning bell chiming softly in the back of my mind. I simply nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes following me all the way to the bar. That was my first conscious encounter with Adrian Castellano, although I would later learn that he'd been watching me for weeks. That night unfolded much like any other, the endless dance of taking orders, delivering drinks, calculating tips. But throughout my entire shift, I remained acutely aware of his presence, of his dark gaze finding me across the room whenever I moved within his line of sight. When I delivered their 3rd round of drinks, Mr. Castellano's fingers brushed against mine as he took the glass. The contact lasted barely a second, but it sent an unexpected jolt through me. Do you enjoy working here, Eleanor? He asked suddenly. I blinked, taken aback by the personal question. It pays the bills, I answered cautiously. He studied me intently for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and produced a black credit card, placing it deliberately on the table. We're finished for the night. I nodded, picking up the card to process their bill. When I returned with the receipt, he had already written in the tip amount, a sum so large that it made my eyes widen slightly. It was more than I typically made in 3 entire shifts. Thank you, I said quietly, unable to completely mask my surprise. This is very generous. You have a child. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. I froze, my protective instincts kicking in immediately. Excuse me? He gestured subtly toward my wrist, where I wore a simple beaded bracelet. Your bracelet. Those are clearly made by small hands. My fingers instinctively went to the uneven strand of colorful beads that Lily had painstakingly strung together at daycare. I always wore it during my shifts, a tangible reminder of what I was working for. My daughter made it, I admitted, uncertain why I was even sharing this information with a complete stranger. She's 4. Something shifted in his expression, a softening so brief that I almost imagined it. Children should have their mothers at night, he said, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. Before I could respond, one of his security men murmured something in his ear. Mr. Castellano nodded, then fixed his dark eyes on me once more. Until Friday, Eleanor. It wasn't until they had left that I realized he'd spoken as if my serving him again was already predetermined, as if some agreement had been reached without my prior knowledge. I shivered slightly, trying to convince myself that it was just the chill from the air conditioning. The next day passed in its usual blur of domestic chaos. The morning rush to get Lily to daycare, a few precious hours of stolen sleep, laundry, grocery shopping on a painfully tight budget, picking up Lily, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. The well-worn rhythm of our small, constrained but cherished life. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, her small fingers wrapped tightly around my beaded bracelet. Mommy, when will I see Daddy again? The innocent question stabbed through me like a knife. Ryan had been gone for almost 2 years, his promises to visit his daughter evaporating like morning mist. I stroked her soft, blonde curls, so much like her father's. I'm not sure, sweetie, I replied softly. Daddy's very busy. Does he still love me? I swallowed the painful lump that had formed in my throat. Of course he does, Lily. Very, very much. She seemed satisfied with this answer, her eyelids growing heavy with sleep. I kissed her forehead and slipped quietly out of her room, leaning against the wall outside her door as tears welled up in my eyes. The truth was that I had absolutely no idea where Ryan was. The last I'd heard, he'd moved out west with his new girlfriend, seemingly unburdened by the responsibilities he'd selfishly left behind. Friday arrived far too quickly. As I got ready for my shift, I found myself taking unusual care with my appearance, adding a touch of mascara and even wearing my hair down instead of in its usual practical bun. I tried to convince myself it was simply because the tips were better when I made an effort, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered otherwise. The Obsidian was unusually crowded that night. As I made my rounds between tables, I kept glancing toward the corner booth. It remained conspicuously empty, and I felt an unsettling mixture of both relief and disappointment. He called earlier, Marco informed me during a brief lull. Said he'd be late. Wants you to hold the table. I simply nodded, ignoring the strange flutter in my stomach. 2 hours into my shift, I was dealing with a particularly demanding group of finance bros when I felt that now familiar shift in the room's energy. I turned to see Adrian Castellano entering the lounge, flanked by his usual security detail. But tonight, there was something palpably different about him. A tension etched around his eyes, a barely contained energy simmering beneath his controlled movements. As he passed the bar, his gaze locked with mine, and something electric passed between us across the crowded room. I nearly dropped the tray I was carrying. I quickly turned my attention back to my customers, but I could still feel his eyes on me, a tangible weight against my skin. When I finally approached his table, he dismissed his security to another booth nearby, marking the first time I'd ever seen him without his ever-present entourage. You look troubled, he observed as I set a tumbler of Macallan before him, not even bothering to wait for his order. Long day, I replied, carefully maintaining my professional distance. Your usual? He nodded, but as I turned to leave, his hand closed around my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. Sit, just for a moment. I glanced nervously at Marco, who was studiously looking anywhere but in our direction. I'm working, I protested weakly. Please, he said. The word sounded foreign and almost unnatural in his mouth, as if he rarely had cause to use it. Against my better judgment, I slid into the booth opposite him, acutely aware of his security team watching us intently from across the room. Why do you work here, Eleanor? He asked, releasing my wrist, but somehow still maintaining his hold on me through the intensity of his gaze. I told you, pays the bills. There are easier ways to make money. I stiffened. Not honest ones. Not for someone like me. A faint smile played on his lips. And what kind of person are you? A single mother with no college degree and no family support, I answered bluntly. This job has flexible hours, and the tips are decent. I don't exactly have a wealth of options. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of his glass. Everyone has options, Eleanor. Some people just require a little assistance in order to see them. There was something dangerous lurking beneath his carefully chosen words, something that immediately made me want to run and hide. I started to slide out of the booth. I should probably get back to work. Your daughter, he said, stopping me. What's her name? I hesitated, my protective instincts flaring. Why do you want to know? Humor me. Lily, I finally answered. Her name is Lily. Something flickered across his face, a fleeting expression that looked almost like pain, quickly masked by his usual guarded demeanor. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope, sliding it deliberately across the table toward me. What is this? I asked, making no move to touch it. Open it later. I stared at the envelope, my heart suddenly racing. Mr. Castellano. Adrian, he corrected smoothly. I can't accept gifts from customers. His dark eyes held mine captive. It's not a gift, Eleanor. It's an opportunity. Before I could respond, a sudden commotion erupted near the bar. A clearly intoxicated man was arguing loudly with the bartender. I recognized him as a semi-regular who'd tried to get my number on several different occasions. "I need to go take care of that," I said, grateful for the convenient interruption. Adrian's expression darkened slightly as he glanced toward the disturbance. "Go," he said curtly. "We'll finish this conversation another time." I slipped away from the table, leaving the untouched envelope behind. For the remainder of my shift, I actively avoided the corner booth, asking another server to cover it. But I could still feel Adrian watching me, his gaze a tangible physical presence against my skin. When I checked the booth later, both he and the envelope were gone. I tried to convince myself that I felt relieved. My relief was short-lived. As I left through the back door after my shift, a sleek black car idled silently in the alley. The back window lowered, revealing Adrian's face partially hidden in shadow. "Allow me to drive you home," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I clutched my bag tighter to my chest. "That's really not necessary. I take the bus." "At this hour?" His disapproval was obvious. "It's not safe." "I do it every night," I countered, already backing slowly toward the street. He studied me intently for a long moment, then held out the envelope from earlier. "At least take this." Against my better judgment, I reluctantly approached the car and accepted the envelope, being careful to avoid any physical contact. "What is it?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something that belongs to you, Eleanor," he replied cryptically. "Good night." The car window slid silently shut, but the vehicle remained stationary, watching as I walked toward the bus stop. Only when the bus finally arrived did the black car pull slowly away. Sitting alone on the nearly empty bus, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a check made out to me for an amount that made me gasp audibly. Clipped to it was a small note written in elegant script on heavy cardstock. "For Lily's future," it read. "This is not charity. This is the beginning of a conversation." I stared at the check, my vision blurring with tears. It was enough to cover 6 months of rent, pay off my remaining debt, and even start a small college fund for Lily. It was freedom and terror all rolled into one, because I knew all too well that nothing in this world came without strings attached. And something deep down told me that Adrian Castellano's strings would undoubtedly bind tighter than most. I didn't cash the check. For 3 long days, it sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. I'd stare at it while I made Lily's breakfast, the numbers seeming to grow larger and more menacing each time I looked. During those rare quiet moments when my daughter was napping, I'd carefully take it out, run my fingers over the heavy paper, and allow myself to imagine what that kind of money could potentially mean for us. A better apartment, one without the constant drip from the ceiling in the corner. A proper winter coat for Lily instead of the worn-out, hand-me-down one she'd soon outgrow. Maybe even a few classes at the community college for me. But I knew better than to accept gifts from men like Adrian Castellano, men who carried power like an intoxicating scent, who watched you from shadowed corners with calculating eyes, men who always expected something significant in return. Tuesday arrived, marking my next scheduled shift at the Obsidian, and I deliberately tucked the uncashed check into my purse. I would return it to him, making it abundantly clear that whatever twisted game he was playing, I wanted absolutely no part of it. My life might be modest, but it was mine, hard-earned and honest. The evening was unusually cold, and I shivered at the bus stop, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. Just then, the same sleek black car from Friday night appeared, sliding silently to the curb beside me. The back window lowered. "You look cold, Eleanor," Adrian said, his face half illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Get in." I took an involuntary step backward. "No, thank you. The bus will be here soon." "Eleanor," he said, simply my name spoken with quiet authority. "Please." Something in his tone, not overtly demanding, but still somehow unyielding, made me hesitate. A sudden gust of wind cut sharply through my thin jacket, and I thought about the long, cold wait for the bus, followed by the equally cold walk from the bus stop to the Obsidian. "Just a ride to work," I clarified, already knowing, deep down, that I was making a mistake. He simply nodded, and the door swung silently open. I slid inside, immediately enveloped in warmth and the rich, intoxicating scent of leather. Adrian sat across from me, the car far more spacious than I had initially anticipated, with facing seats separated by a small console. One of his security men sat silently beside him, eyes fixed forward, his expression completely unreadable. "Thank you," I murmured, keeping my body angled slightly toward the door. Adrian simply studied me, his dark gaze intense and unnerving. "You didn't cash my check." I reached into my purse and retrieved the envelope, extending it toward him. "I can't accept this, Mr. Castellano." He made no move to take it. "Why not?" "Because I don't know what it means, what you expect in return." A slight smile played on his lips. "A fair concern. Tell me, Eleanor, what do you think I want?" The question hung heavily in the air between us, loaded with unspoken implications. I thought of the way his eyes followed me relentlessly across the crowded lounge, of the brief, electrifying brush of his fingers against mine, of the strange tension that seemed to crackle in the air whenever we were in close proximity. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I know that nothing in this world comes without expectations. Perhaps my only expectation was to see if you would take it." He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes boring into mine. "Many would have done so without question." "Well, I'm not many people, Mr. Castellano." His smile deepened. "No, Eleanor, you certainly are not." He nodded subtly toward the envelope, still clutched tightly in my hand. "Keep it. Use it or don't. That's entirely your choice, but it's yours to make." I wanted to refuse again, to insist that he take back this unwanted complication. But before I could form the words, the car began to slow to a stop. We had arrived at the Obsidian, the journey having taken less than half the time the bus would have. "One more thing, Eleanor," Adrian said as I reached for the door handle. "I won't be at the lounge tonight." I told myself that the slight twinge I felt wasn't disappointment. "Oh, I have business out of town. I'll return on Friday." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small card, offering it to me. "If you need anything while I'm gone." I accepted the card almost reflexively, noticing that it held only a phone number and no name. "I won't need anything, Mr. Castellano." His expression turned serious. "The world can be unpredictable, Eleanor." "Indulge me," he said, simply my name spoken with quiet intensity. The look in his eyes made it almost impossible to refuse. I slipped the card into my pocket without another word, then exited the car, still clutching the envelope tightly in my hand. The night passed slowly without Adrian's magnetic presence in the corner booth. I found myself glancing there throughout my shift, the empty space somehow more conspicuous than when it was occupied. By the end of the night, I had finally made a decision. I would cash the check, but only to start a college fund for Lily. None of it would go toward our daily living expenses. That way, it truly would be solely for her future, exactly as his note had suggested. The very next morning, after dropping Lily off at daycare, I visited my local bank. The teller's eyes widened slightly at the amount of the check, but it cleared without any issues. As I completed the paperwork to open a separate savings account in my daughter's name, a peculiar feeling settled over me, a strange sensation that I had just accepted something far more significant than money. Wednesday and Thursday passed uneventfully. I even picked up an extra shift on Thursday night to cover for a coworker, grateful for the additional income. The familiar routine of work and motherhood continued as usual. Lily's endless stream of questions about the world, the constant mental calculations required to stretch our already limited budget, the bone-deep exhaustion that never seemed to fully leave me. Then, on Friday morning, as I was rushing to get Lily ready for daycare, my phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Bennett?" A woman's crisp voice inquired when I answered. "This is Sunshine Daycare Center. I'm calling about Lily." My heart skipped a beat. "Is she okay? What happened?" "She's fine, but she seems to have developed a fever. Our policy requires that she be picked up immediately." I closed my eyes, doing some rapid mental calculations. A missed shift at the Obsidian would mean at least $200 less in tips. Money that I really couldn't afford to lose. But Lily always came first. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, already reaching for my jacket. When I arrived at the daycare center, Lily was sitting alone in the waiting area. Her cheeks flushed and her normally bright eyes glazed over with fever. She immediately reached for me. "Mommy, my head hurts," she whimpered as I gathered her tightly into my arms. "I know, baby," I soothed, pressing my lips gently to her forehead. She was burning up. "We're going home right now." The center director approached, her expression pinched with disapproval. "She'll need to be fever-free for 24 hours before she can return." I nodded, already trying to calculate the financial cost of missing additional shifts. "I understand." By the time we got home, Lily's fever had climbed even higher. I gave her some children's fever reducer, tucked her into her bed, and then called the pediatrician's office. They couldn't see her until Monday unless her temperature exceeded 103 degrees. It was currently hovering just below that critical mark. I placed a cool cloth on her forehead and then called the Obsidian to explain that I wouldn't be able to make my shift. Marco was understanding but also firm. "I'm sorry about your daughter, Ellie, but I need to find someone to cover. I can't promise your usual section will be available when you return." The implied threat was crystal clear. In the cutthroat world of high-end service, being unavailable meant being easily replaceable. I hung up the phone, feeling sick with worry about Lily's deteriorating health, about our precarious financial situation, and about the very real possibility of losing the job that barely kept us afloat. As the long afternoon wore on, Lily's fever continued to rise despite the medication. She became increasingly lethargic, her small body radiating heat. When her temperature finally hit 103.5, I knew that we needed to go to the emergency room immediately, but the logistics seemed almost insurmountable. I had no car. A taxi would cost money that I simply didn't have. Taking the bus would expose Lily to the cold and to other potentially sick passengers. In desperation, I remembered the small card that Adrian had given me. "If you need anything at all, call this number." I stared at it for what felt like a long time, weighing my pride against my daughter's immediate need. Then, with trembling hands, I dialed the number. A man answered on the second ring, but it wasn't Adrian. "Yes, I stammered hesitantly. "I'm trying to reach Adrian Castellano. This is Eleanor Bennett." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "One moment, please." Less than 30 seconds later, Adrian's familiar voice came through the phone. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" Something about his immediate assumption that I was calling out of need rather than desire sent a complicated mix of emotions swirling through me. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Castellano. I really wouldn't call if it wasn't." "Tell me what you need," he interrupted, his tone suddenly gentle but insistent. "It's Lily. She's very sick. A high fever. I need to get her to a hospital. But I don't know how to reach him. What's your address?" He interrupted. The background noise suggested he was already on the move. I hesitated for only a moment before rattling off my address. "Apartment 4B. Just stay put. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead before I could even say okay. I glanced down at Lily, her face flushed with fever and her breathing heavy, and pushed all my worries aside. Her being okay was all that mattered. Right on time, at 12:24 a.m., a hard knock echoed through my apartment. I opened the door to find Adrian standing there, without any of the security guys that usually followed him around. The sight of him in his fancy clothes against the backdrop of my rundown building was jarring. His eyes scanned past me, taking in my small living room before settling on Lily, who was bundled up in a blanket on the couch. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, already stepping inside as if he didn't need to be invited. "The fever started this morning, but it's gotten worse in the last few hours." I closed the door behind him, suddenly super aware of how different he looked in his tailored suit compared to my old jeans and t-shirt. Adrian walked over to the couch, kneeling down so he was at the same height as Lily. "Hi, Lily," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. My name is Adrian. I'm gonna help you and your mom get to the doctor. Okay. Lily stared at him with her fever-bright eyes. Are you Mommy's friend? A complicated look crossed his face. Yes, he answered simply, then turned to me. We should get going now. Outside, the same black car was waiting at the curb, the engine already running. Adrian scooped Lily up in his arms like she weighed nothing, making sure her blanket was snug around her as he carried her to the car. I followed behind, grabbing her little backpack with all the essentials. I was surprised to see that the car was empty except for the driver, who was separated from us by a privacy screen. Adrian settled Lily between us, her small body leaning against me. I've arranged for a pediatric specialist to meet us, he said, in a way that didn't invite discussion. Adrian, the ER would have been fine. I just needed a ride. Dr. Levin is one of the best pediatricians in the city, he said calmly, cutting me off. She's waiting for us at Mercy Hospital. I blinked, totally caught off guard. How did you? That would take days to arrange. A tiny smile played on his lips. Not for me. The unspoken meaning of his words hung in the air, a reminder of the power he had, of the connections he could call on that were way beyond anything I could imagine. I looked down at Lily, reminding myself that nothing mattered more than her being okay. Thank you, I said quietly. Adrian's hand moved across the seat, his fingers brushing against mine for a second. You don't need to thank me. At the hospital, we skipped the crowded waiting room and were taken straight to a private exam room, where a classy-looking woman in a white coat was waiting. Mr. Castellano, she greeted him with a nod before turning her attention to Lily. And you must be my patient. Let's take a look at you, young lady. The next hour was a blur of exams, blood tests, and talking to doctors. Dr. Levin figured out that Lily had a bad case of strep throat that had been going on for too long, which explained the high fever. She gave her antibiotics and wanted to keep Lily for a few hours to keep an eye on her and give her fluids through and for. Through it all, Adrian stayed quiet and steady, only stepping out now and then to take a phone call. Once Lily was settled in a private room, hooked up to and for, and finally resting, he found me in the hallway where I was trying to get myself together. She'll be fine, he said, his voice a deep rumble that was somehow reassuring. Kids are really resilient. I nodded, trying not to cry from relief. I should have brought her in sooner. I just thought it was a cold, and daycare is already so expensive. My voice trailed off, feeling embarrassed to be talking about money problems with him. But Adrian didn't seem to be judging me. Instead, he seemed to get it, which surprised me. You're doing the best you can, he said simply. That's all anyone can do. The sincerity in his voice seemed to break something loose inside me. Sometimes my best doesn't feel like enough, I admitted, the words just tumbling out before I could stop them. Every day is just about getting by, making it to the next day. I want more for her, you know? I want her to have chances I never had. I want her to know she's safe, that she doesn't have to worry about. I trailed off, gesturing to the money struggles that were just part of our lives. Adrian watched me carefully, his dark eyes hard to read. What about what you want for yourself? His question caught me off guard. It had been so long since I had even thought about what I wanted, separate from what Lily needed. That stopped mattering when she was born. You shouldn't have to. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. What should be and what is are usually two different things, at least in my experience. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that seemed to come from a different world than mine. Reality can be changed, Eleanor, he said quietly. With the right resources, the right protection. There was something dangerous in his words, in the way he was looking at me. I took a step back without thinking. I should go check on Lily. Adrian didn't try to stop me, but as I turned to go, he spoke again. I have connections at Brighton Academy. I stopped in my tracks. Brighton Academy was one of the best private schools in the city, known for its amazing early education program and its crazy high tuition. Lily would do great there, he continued. She could start next semester. I turned back to him slowly. Why are you doing this? His face didn't change. but I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something that looked almost like he was vulnerable. Maybe I recognized something in you, something rare. And what's that? Integrity, he answered. The word hung there, full of meaning that I didn't quite understand. In my world, that's more precious than diamonds. Before I could answer, Dr. Levin came up to us, telling us that Lily was doing well and could go home soon. The moment passed, but Adrian's words stayed with me, echoing in my mind like a warning or a promise. Hours later, after Lily had been discharged with her antibiotics and a list of instructions, Adrian insisted on driving us home. Lily had totally warmed up to him, and her natural charm was back now that her fever was going down. I was surprised that Adrian was so patient with all her questions, his usual serious face softening when he was around her. When we got to my apartment building, Adrian carried Lily, who was asleep, up the 4 flights of stairs without even complaining. I unlocked the door, feeling super self-conscious about him seeing my place. The water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the thin walls that let you hear the neighbors arguing all the time. I led him to Lily's little bedroom, where he gently laid her on the bed. I covered her with her favorite blanket, brushing the hair off her forehead and happy that her skin was cooler. When I turned around, Adrian was looking at the drawings pinned to Lily's wall, bright, childish pictures of houses and stick figures. He touched one lightly, a drawing of what looked like Lily and me, holding hands in front of a house that was way bigger and fancier than our apartment. She has talent, he said quietly. She's obsessed with houses, I said, moving to stand next to him. She draws them everywhere. I think she wants a backyard. Adrian turned to me, and we were suddenly really close in the small room. Every child should have a place to belong, he said softly. A true home. Something in his voice made me think he was speaking from experience. I wondered about his childhood, about what had made him into the man who was now standing in my daughter's bedroom, who had arranged for special medical care with one phone call, who was looking at my kids' drawings like they actually meant something. Thank you, I said, for today, for everything. He reached out, his fingertips just barely touching my cheek. Get some rest, Eleanor. I'll check on you both tomorrow. It wasn't a question or a request, just a statement. And as I watched him leave, I wasn't sure if I was more scared or excited about him coming back. After he left, I sat next to Lily's bed, watching her sleep peacefully, and thinking about everything that had happened that day, how easily Adrian had stepped in to help, how much power he had, and how he could be surprisingly gentle. I didn't get why he had chosen to get involved in our lives. What could someone like him want from someone like me? But as I got up to go to bed, I noticed Lily's bracelet on my wrist. The uneven beads were a reminder of what was most important. Whatever game Adrian Castellano was playing, whatever he really wanted, one thing was for sure. For Lily's sake, I had to be careful. Because guys like him don't just walk into your life without changing it, for better or for worse. And as I started to fall asleep, I couldn't decide which possibility scared me more. Like he said he would, Adrian came back the next day. I opened the door to find him standing there with groceries in one hand and a small package wrapped in bright paper in the other. You didn't have to do this, I said, stepping aside to let him in. I wanted to. His eyes scanned past me, looking around. How is she? Much better. Her fever broke completely overnight. I took the groceries from him, peeking in the bag to see organic fruits and vegetables, expensive cuts of meat, and other stuff I usually couldn't afford. This is too much. It's food, Eleanor. Nothing more. His voice was gentle but firm, like he knew I was struggling between my pride and needing to be practical. The gift is for Lily. As if she heard her name, my daughter came into the hallway, her blonde hair messy from sleeping, her cheeks looking healthy instead of red from fever. You came back, she said, her face lighting up when she saw Adrian. Something changed in his expression, a softness that made him look younger, less guarded. I promised I would. He knelt down to her, holding out the wrapped gift. This is for you to help you feel better. Lily took the gift with wide eyes, looking at me to see if it was okay. When I nodded, she ripped into the wrapping paper with the wild excitement that only kids can have. Inside was a teddy bear wearing a tiny doctor's coat and a stethoscope. "He can take care of you when you're sick," Adrian explained, watching her reaction. Lily hugged the bear tight, then, surprising me, threw her arms around Adrian's neck. "Thank you. I'm going to name him Dr. Bear." For a second, Adrian seemed frozen, like he wasn't used to that kind of affection. Then, carefully, he hugged her back, his large hand patting her back with unexpected tenderness. When he stood up, I saw something real in his eyes before he put his usual composed face back on. "Are you hungry?" I asked, partly to break the moment. I was about to make breakfast. "I'd like that," he said, following me to the small kitchen while Lily went off to show Dr. Bear her room. It was weird seeing Adrian Castellano in my cramped kitchen, his expensive suit and powerful presence clashing with the old countertops and appliances. But he moved around like he belonged there, helping me unpack the groceries he'd brought, asking where things went like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You didn't go back to work yesterday?" he said as I started mixing pancake batter. A special treat for Lily that I could now afford because of his groceries. I whisked the mixture harder than I needed to. "No, Lily needed me. Will there be problems?" I hesitated, the reality of my situation weighing on me. "Possibly." Marco hinted that my usual section might not be available when I get back. Adrian's face darkened. "I'll talk to him." "No," I said quickly, putting down the bowl. "Please don't. I don't want special treatment." "Why not?" "The world runs on special treatment, Eleanor. On connections and favors and power. Not my world." A smile touched his lips. "Your world and mine have already crossed paths, whether you like it or not." Before I could answer, Lily bounced back into the kitchen, holding Dr. Bear tight, and the conversation changed to lighter topics. Throughout breakfast, I was fascinated watching Adrian with my daughter, answering her endless questions patiently, cutting her pancakes into perfect triangles when she decided that circles were boring. There was a natural connection between them that made me both happy and uneasy. Lily didn't have many men in her life. Her father had been gone for years, and I hadn't introduced her to any of the guys I dated briefly after Ryan left. But here she was, talking comfortably with a man who, despite being unexpectedly kind, was still a stranger. A stranger who also seemed dangerous and powerful, which I couldn't ignore. After breakfast, Adrian insisted on doing the dishes, rolling up his sleeves and showing strong forearms with a few faint scars that I hadn't noticed before. I wondered where he'd gotten them as I dried the plates he handed me. "I need to go back to work tonight," I said, breaking the comfortable silence between us. "If Lily keeps getting better." Adrian nodded. "I'll have someone drive you." "That's not necessary." "It is to me," he interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. He handed me the last plate, his fingers brushing against mine on purpose. I thought, "Your safety matters, Eleanor." The intensity in his dark eyes made me catch my breath. Why do you care what happens to us?" For a long moment, he just looked at me, something unspoken passing between us. Then Lily called from the living room, breaking the tension. "You should spend the day resting," Adrian said, drying his hands on a towel. "Both of you. I have some business to take care of, but I'll be back tonight to drive you to work." Again, not a question, just a statement. I was starting to see this pattern with Adrian. He didn't ask, he decided. With a different guy in different circumstances, this might have been a red flag, but there was something about how he included me, how he seemed to genuinely care about my comfort even when he ignored what I said, that felt less like control and more like protection. After he left, I spent the day with Lily, so thankful to have the chance to just be with her without having to worry about work or bills. We built a fort out of blankets in the living room, read stories, and took a nap together in the afternoon. As the day went on, I kept checking the clock, feeling excited and nervous as evening got closer. Adrian arrived exactly when he said he would, this time with just one security guy, who stayed in the car while he came up to the apartment. Ms. Rodriguez from next door had agreed to watch Lily. She often did when I worked evenings, and my daughter was excited to introduce her to Dr. Bear. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked, standing in my doorway, his eyes scanning me in a way that made me suddenly self-conscious about how I looked. The simple black dress I wore for work, my hair in a ponytail, the little bit of makeup I'd put on more carefully than usual. I nodded, grabbing my purse and jacket. "Thank you for doing this." "It's nothing," he said, though we both knew it wasn't nothing. It was part of whatever had started between us that first night at the Obsidian. This strange dance of favors and gratitude, of power and vulnerability. In the car, Adrian sat next to me instead of across from me, close enough that I could feel his body heat. We didn't talk for several minutes, the silence charged with tension. "I spoke with Brighton Academy," he said finally. "They have an opening for next semester." I tensed up. "Adrian, I can't afford. It's been taken care of." I turned to face him. "What does that mean?" His face was calm, hard to read. "It means Lily has a place if you want her to have it. A full scholarship." "There's no such thing as a free scholarship," I said carefully. "What would be expected in return?" Adrian's dark eyes met mine. "Nothing from you, Eleanor. Think of it as an investment in potential." "Lily's potential?" A small smile touched his lips. "Hers and maybe yours." There was a heavy meaning in his words that I couldn't figure out. "I don't understand what you want from us." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Have you ever had someone believe in you? Really believe in what you could be, if you had the right chances?" His question hit me hard. No one had ever seen me as anything more than what I was. A waitress, a single mom, a woman struggling to survive. Not my parents, who had given up on me when I got pregnant at 22. Not Ryan, who had seen me as someone to run away from. Not even me on my worst days. "No," I answered honestly. Adrian's hand covered mine, his touch warm and gentle. "Then maybe that's what I want to give you. The chance to become who you could be, without the constant stress of just trying to survive." His words painted a picture that was so tempting it made my chest hurt. A life where every decision wasn't about money. Where Lily could have chances I'd never even dreamed of. Where I could go after the things I'd given up on. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why us out of all the people you could help?" Something flashed in his eyes, a hint of pain or a memory. "Because you remind me of someone who never got the chance to become who she could have been." Before I could ask more, the car stopped outside the Obsidian. Adrian squeezed my hand before letting go. "Think about Brighton, for Lily's sake, if not your own." I nodded, unable to speak because of the emotions swirling inside me. As I opened the door, he added, "I'll be there tonight, same table." His promise lingered in my mind as I went inside. To my relief, Marco just gave me his usual tired nod, not saying anything about me missing work the night before. When I checked the reservation list, I saw why. The corner booth was booked under Castellaniano for the whole evening, and they had specifically asked for me to be their server. The night went on pretty much like any other night before Adrian had walked into my life. The usual rhythm of taking orders, making drinks, and making polite conversation. But everything felt different because I knew he was there in the corner booth. I was super aware of his eyes on me as I moved around the room, of the way the people at his table would stop talking when I came near. Tonight, he wasn't alone. Besides his usual security guys, a woman was sitting with him, really beautiful, with sleek dark hair and the kind of confidence that you only get from having a lot of money. Something hot and unfamiliar churned in my stomach as I watched them talking closely, her manicured hand resting casually on his arm. "Ellie!" Marco's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. "Table 12 needs their check." I nodded, forcing myself to focus on my job. I was professional all night, even when I was serving Adrian's table. I addressed him formally, not looking him in the eye, and focusing on taking care of the drinks and the woman's requests. "Eleanor," Adrian said quietly as I cleared their empty glasses. "This is my sister, Sophia." Sister. The relief I felt was so strong and immediate that I almost dropped the tray I was holding. The woman, Sophia, gave me a knowing smile, like she'd seen my reaction. "So, you're Eleanor," she said, looking me over with eyes that were just like her brother's. "Adrian has mentioned you." I glanced at him, surprised. "Has he?" "Incessantly." Sophia said with a mischievous grin. Though he failed to mention how pretty you are, I felt my face turn red. Can I get you anything else? Actually, Adrian interrupted. Sophia was just leaving. He gave his sister a pointed look, and she just shrugged, amused. Duty calls, she said to me, picking up an elegant purse. But I do hope we'll meet again, Eleanor. Maybe when things are less formal. After she left, escorted by one of the security guys, the vibe at the table changed. Adrian dismissed the remaining guard with a small gesture, leaving us alone when I came back with his usual Macallan. Your sister seems nice, I said, putting the drink in front of him. She's a menace, he said, but he sounded fond. And way too interested in my personal life. Is that what I am? Personal affair? The question just came out without me even thinking about it. His dark eyes met mine, intense and hard to read. You are unexpected, Eleanor. In my life, unexpected things are rarely welcome. They represent variables, complications, potential weaknesses. He took a sip of his whiskey, never breaking eye contact. And yet, here you are. His words hung between us, heavy with meaning that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I took a step back. I should check on my other tables. Adrian nodded. When does your shift end tonight? Midnight. I'll be here. The rest of my shift went by in a blur of taking orders, but I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian in the corner. He stayed the whole time, sometimes talking on his phone, but mostly just watching the room, and me with a careful attention. As midnight got closer, there was a commotion near the entrance. A man's loud voice cut through the quiet atmosphere of the lounge. I turned and saw a face that made my blood run cold. Ryan, Lily's father, was arguing with the host at the door. He was obviously drunk, his handsome face flushed with alcohol and anger. I just want to talk to Ellie, he said loudly. She works here, right? Eleanor Bennett. I froze, feeling panicked. I hadn't seen Ryan in almost 2 years, and I had no idea he even knew where I worked. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Adrian stiffen, his attention focused on the scene. Marco went over to Ryan, trying to calm him down. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't allow. There she is. Ryan saw me, pushing past Marco with the clumsy confidence of someone who was really drunk. Ellie, baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Ryan, what are you doing here? I came to see you. He reached for me, swaying. I miss you. I miss Lily. I messed up, baby. You gotta go, I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice was shaking a little. You're drunk, and I'm working. His face got all hard. Still got that stick up your ass? Huh? Always so damn righteous. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging in so hard it hurt. I have a right to see my daughter. Let go of me, I hissed, trying to yank my arm away without making a scene. The last thing I needed was to lose my job because of him. Ryan squeezed my wrist tighter. We need to talk about Lily. She asked you to let go. Adrian's voice, quiet as it was, sliced through the air like a knife. He was standing right behind Ryan, looking totally relaxed, but his eyes were like ice, a banked fury that sent a shiver down my spine. Ryan turned around, giving Adrian the once-over with the terrible judgment of someone completely wasted. Who the hell are you? Her new sugar daddy? Adrian didn't react to the insult. He just glanced at Ryan's hand still clamped around my wrist. I won't repeat myself, he said, each word slow and deliberate. Something in his voice, a complete confidence that he'd be obeyed, seemed to get through even Ryan's drunken haze. He let go of my wrist, taking a step back. Whatever, man. This is between me and her. Ryan turned back to me. I need money, Elle. Just until I can get back on my feet. For Lily's sake. The same old song and dance. Ryan's empty promises, his manipulation, the way he used our daughter to get what he wanted. It lit a fire in me, burning away the fear. You don't get to use her name, I said, my voice louder now. Not after disappearing for 2 years. Not after everything you've put us through. Ryan's face twisted up with anger. You self-righteous bitch. I have rights. He never finished the sentence. In one quick move, Adrian stepped between us, his hand closing around Ryan's throat with just enough pressure. Not enough to choke him, but enough to get his full attention. Rights? Adrian repeated, the word dripping with disgust. Let's talk about rights. He leaned in close to Ryan, whose eyes had gone wide with sudden, belated sobriety. You gave up any rights when you walked out on your kid. And when you put your hands on her mother, in my establishment. My breath caught. My establishment. The meaning of those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I own this place, Adrian went on, his voice dropping to a low growl that somehow carried clearly to me and probably half the people in the place. I have connections in places you've never even heard of. I can make things very, very difficult for a man with your history. Ryan went white as a sheet. Look, I didn't know. Now you do. Adrian let him go with a little shove. If you contact Eleanor again without her express invitation, if you come within 100 feet of her or her daughter, I will personally make sure it's the last mistake you ever make. Am I perfectly clear? Ryan nodded real fast, all his tough guy act gone. He shot me one last scared look before hurrying toward the exit, practically tripping over himself to get away. The whole bar had gone quiet during the whole thing. Everyone was staring at us. Adrian turned to face the room, his face smoothing out into a polite, almost bored expression. Please enjoy your evening, he said, like nothing weird had just happened. The next round is on the house. The trick worked. People slowly started talking again, looking away. Marco came over, looking at me with a mix of worry and respect I'd never seen before. Take the rest of the night off, Ellie, he said quietly. With pay, Mr. Castellano's orders. I just nodded, too stunned to say anything. Adrian put his hand on the small of my back, guiding me toward the staff room. Get your things, he murmured in my ear. I'm taking you home. In the back. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my purse and jacket. I couldn't stop replaying the last few minutes in my head. Ryan showing up out of nowhere, Adrian stepping in, the bomb that he owned the Obsidian. Not just some VIP, not just a rich guy who liked the place, but my boss. When I came out, Adrian was waiting by the back door, looking tight and controlled. In the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway, I could see the dangerous edge under his polished exterior, clearer than ever. You own the bar, I said as we walked out into the alley. It wasn't a question. Yes. No more explanation, no excuses. How long have you been watching me? His dark eyes met mine. Since the first night you served my table. 3 months ago. That should have scared me, should have made me run the other way. But instead, I felt this weird, twisted sense of safe. Knowing that he was interested in me wasn't some accident. It was on purpose. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything? He countered. Would you have taken my help easier, knowing I was your boss? Or would you have run? I thought about it as we walked to his car. I might have run, I admitted. A little smile touched his lips. Exactly. In the car it was quiet, but heavy. Full of questions we weren't asking, truths we weren't saying. Adrian watched me, his face hidden in the shadows. Who was he? He asked finally. Besides Lily's father. I looked down at my hands, at the red marks Ryan's fingers had left on my wrist. My ex. We were together for 3 years. He left when Lily was 2, took our savings, vanished. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Classic story. Adrienne's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you before tonight? The question hung in the air, full of unspoken danger. I chose my words carefully. Not physically, but there are lots of ways to hurt someone. His face darkened. Yes, there are. The way he said it, like he knew it firsthand. Whether he'd been hurt or been the one doing the hurting, I couldn't tell. Both thoughts made me shiver. He won't bother you again, Adrian said, like it was a promise. What did you mean? I asked. About his history? He looked at me, like he was trying to decide how much to tell me. I had you and Lily looked into when I first got interested. It's standard procedure in my position. Ryan owes some very bad people a lot of money, people I know. The casual way he said he'd investigated us should have made me mad. Should have felt like a violation. But I just felt strangely calm. Is that why you talked to me? Because of Ryan? No. Adrienne's voice was firm. My interest in you has nothing to do with him. He put his hand over mine. His touch was warm and steady. Nothing. The car pulled up to my apartment. Adrienne told the driver to wait, then walked me inside. We went up the stairs in silence. The night was settling between us like a weight. At my door I stopped, holding my key. Thank you for what you did tonight. Adrienne looked at me, his dark eyes intense in the dim light. You don't need to thank me for that. Yes, I do, I said quietly. No one's ever stood up for me like that before. Something flashed in his eyes. Maybe anger that I'd been in those kinds of situations before. That changes now, he said, his voice low and certain. He reached out and gently touched the marks on my wrist. It sent a jolt of electricity through me, waking up feelings I thought I'd forgotten. I looked up at him, his face closer than I expected, his eyes asking a question. In that moment, caught between being scared and wanting him, between being careful and needing something, I made a choice. I leaned in and kissed him. Adrienne didn't move for a second. Then he kissed me back, his hand coming up to hold my face so gently. The kiss got deeper, setting something off inside me, something wild and hungry. His other arm went around my waist, pulling me against him. When we finally stopped, both of us a little breathless, I saw something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable, a glimpse behind the mask he wore so well. Eleanor, he murmured, my name like a question and a warning all at once. Stay, I whispered, surprising myself with how bold I was being. Just for a little while. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded and followed me inside. Ms. Rodriguez had left a note saying Lily was asleep, had taken her medicine, and had eaten well. I checked on my daughter, finding her curled up with Dr. Bear, before going back to the living room. Adrian was standing by the window, his shape dark against the city lights. In that moment, I saw him clearly for what he was. Dangerous, powerful, a man used to being in control. But I also saw something else, something in the way he'd been with my daughter, the way he'd protected me tonight. A softness that maybe not many people got to see. I walked toward him, pulled by something I didn't understand, knowing that I was walking into something that would change my life forever. For better or worse, Adrian Castellano was now part of my life, part of my daughter's future, part of dreams I hadn't even let myself have. And even though every alarm bell in my head was going off, I couldn't turn away. Adrian didn't stay the night. After we talked quietly for an hour on my beat-up couch, his phone buzzed. Business, he said vaguely. Before he left, he kissed me again. A gentle, almost respectful kiss that stayed with me long after he was gone. The next week was like a dream, or maybe like a play he was carefully putting on. Adrian had his driver take me to work every night, waiting to drive me home after my shift. Every morning, fresh food showed up at my door. Lily got little presents twice, toys that helped her learn. Adrian himself came over every other day, always bringing something thoughtful. A book I'd said I wanted to read, a warm winter coat for Lily, a nice set of cooking knives. I said I liked to cook. I should have been suspicious of how generous he was being. Instead, I found myself liking it, liking him. We started talking about deeper things, but he was still careful about some parts of his life. He talked about his sister like he really cared about her, mentioned he didn't get along with his father, said he loved old buildings. But when I asked about his job, he changed the subject easily. It's better if you don't know the details, he told me one night at my kitchen table after Lily was in bed. Safer. The word hung there, full of things I didn't want to think about. I just focused on how he made my small apartment feel, full of some kind of energy. How his eyes softened when he looked at me. How he was starting to fit into our lives. On Friday night, after my shift at the Obsidian, Adrian didn't take me straight home. I want to show you something, he said as the car pulled away. Do you trust me? The question felt bigger than just that moment. Did I trust him? This man who'd come into my life so fast, who had so much power, who lived in a world I didn't know. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. We drove to a quiet neighborhood with fancy brownstone houses. The car stopped in front of a really beautiful one with shiny windows and a small garden behind an iron fence. "What is this place?" I asked as Adrian helped me out of the car. "A possibility?" he said, being mysterious, and led me up the steps. He unlocked the door with a key and showed me inside. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. High ceilings, wood floors, soft colors on the walls, nice furniture that looked comfortable but elegant. "This is yours?" I asked, walking around, looking at everything. "It could be yours," he said quietly. "And Lily's." I turned to him, shocked. "What?" Adrian came closer, looking serious. "This apartment has 3 bedrooms, a study that could be a playroom, and a garden where Lily could have that backyard she wants. It's 5 blocks from Brighton Academy." "Adrian," I said, overwhelmed by what he was saying. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Is it?" He came closer, looking right at me. "Tell me something, Eleanor. Are you happy in that apartment? Does Lily have enough room? Do you feel safe there? Especially after Ryan showed up." Just hearing Ryan's name made me shiver. I hadn't seen him since that night at the Obsidian, but I still had nightmares about his angry face. "No," I admitted. "But I can't just take a home from you." "Why not?" Adrian cupped my cheek, his touch gentle. "What if I need you to take it as much as you need the safety it gives you?" Something in his voice, a hint of something vulnerable, made me ask, "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a long time, his thumb rubbing my cheek. "I've spent my whole life around people who want things from me. My money, my power, my protection, never just me." His eyes held mine, full of something I couldn't quite figure out. "Until you've given me so much," I whispered. "I have nothing to give back." "That's exactly why." He stopped himself, like he was changing his mind about what he was going to say. "That's what makes you different. Special." He showed me the rest of the apartment, all the rooms carefully decorated. The master bedroom with a fancy bathroom. The second bedroom, already set up for a kid with a canopy bed and bookshelves. The third bedroom, a guest room, but he said it could be anything I wanted. In the kitchen, everything was new and expensive. Adrian pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. "Say yes," he whispered in my hair. "Let me give you and Lily this safety." I leaned into him, torn. What would people think? What would Lily think when she was old enough to understand? "What people think has never mattered to me," he said. "As for Lily, we'll worry about that when the time comes." The way he said it made my heart flutter. Adrian had only been in our lives for a short time, but I couldn't picture my life without him anymore. "I need to think about it," I said finally. He nodded, not arguing. Of course. Later that night, outside my apartment door, Adrian kissed me hard, making me breathless. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised. But tomorrow came and went, and I didn't hear from him. Neither did the next day. By Sunday night, I had a knot of worry in my stomach. Had he changed his mind? Had he been mad that I didn't say yes right away? Monday was my day off from the Obsidian. I was helping Lily build a tower of blocks when someone knocked hard on the door. It was Sophia, Adrian's sister, looking less elegant than usual, all tense. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's about Adrian." I felt a shot of fear as I let her in. "What's wrong? Is he okay?" Sophia looked at Lily, who was watching us from the floor. I knew what she meant. "Lily, honey, why don't you take Dr. Bear to your room for a little bit? Mommy needs to talk to this lady." When Lily was gone, Sophia said quietly, "Adrian's been arrested." Felt like a punch to the gut. Arrested? For what? Officially, racketeering, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. She ran a hand through her hair, just like her brother did, and it made my chest hurt. Really, it's a power move from another group. They've been planning this for months, building a case with someone on the inside. I slowly started to understand what she was saying. I'd known Adrian's business wasn't completely legal. I'd seen the signs of power and danger around him, but hearing it said so plainly made it impossible to ignore. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely there. His lawyers are working on bail, but the prosecutors are saying he might run. Sophia looked right at me with her dark eyes, so much like Adrienne's. There's something you need to know, Eleanor. Something Adrien should have told you himself. My heart was pounding. What is it? The reason he first talked to you, it wasn't random. She hesitated, choosing her words. Your ex, Ryan, he worked for Adrienne's organization for a little while about 3 years ago. He got caught stealing money, selling information to other people. I felt like the floor was moving under me. What are you saying? Adrien was going to take care of him permanently. But then he found out Ryan had a kid, a daughter. Sophia's face softened. Adrien has a rule. Kids shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. So instead of killing Ryan, he made him leave. He told him to stay away from the city, away from his people. It was supposed to be a kindness. I sat down on the couch, trying to take it all in. So, when Adrien saw me at the Obsidian, he knew my name from the investigation into Ryan? He was curious? He wanted to see what I was like and if I was mixed up in Ryan's stuff? Sophia sat next to me, her voice softer now. Yes, but what he found was unexpected. Someone honest, hardworking, who loved her child. Someone who reminded him of our mother. Your mother? Sophia looked sad. She died when Adrien was 15. I was 12. Cancer. Our father changed after that. Became hard, cold. Adrien took care of me. She reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. He sees himself as a protector, Eleanor. Always has. I thought about how Adrien was with Lily, how he'd protected me from Ryan, how he wanted to give us a safe place to live. It was all starting to make sense. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Adrien's been asking for you since he was arrested. He won't talk to his lawyers until he sees you. Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. He asked me to give you this and to take you to him if you want to go. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter in Adrien's handwriting. Eleanor, if you're reading this, things have made me have a conversation I've been avoiding. By now, Sophia has told you some things about me, about how we met. There's more, a lot more, that you should know. I was going to tell you everything when the time was right. I wanted you to know me first, the man, not the stories about me. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe I was scared of losing you. I'm not a good man, not in the usual way. I've done things I can't take back. But I've tried to protect the people who deserve it, to keep my word. I'll understand if you want to leave. I wouldn't blame you. But if you believe that what we have is real, I just want a chance to talk to you one last time. The choice is yours. I folded the letter, feeling all kinds of things. Part of me wanted to run away and keep Lily and myself safe from Adrien's world. Another part of me remembered how he looked at my daughter, how strong and gentle he was, how he made me feel safe and strong at the same time. When can I see him? I asked finally. Sophia looked relieved. Now, if you're ready. I've taken care of everything. I called Ms. Rodriguez to watch Lily, changed my clothes, and followed Sophia to the car. As we drove to the detention center, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. What would happen to Adrien? What would this mean for us? For the fragile, beautiful thing that was growing between us? Could I love a man whose world was so dark? The answer, I knew, was that I already did. The detention center was a cold, ugly building. Inside, I had to give up my phone and go through security. Then, I was taken to a private room, which I knew was a special thing. When Adrien came in, I couldn't breathe. He was wearing a prison jumpsuit, which should have made him look less powerful, but it didn't. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but he still stood tall. He looked right at me, and I saw something in his face before he made himself look calm. Eleanor, he said. Just my name, softly, like he didn't know if he could say it anymore. Adrien. I stayed in my chair, my hands in my lap. He sat across from me, not getting too close. I could see how tired he was, the lines on his face. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, I said. Sophia told me about Ryan, about why you noticed me. Adrien nodded slowly. I should have told you myself. Yes, you should have. I looked right at him. What else haven't you told me? He held my gaze for a long moment, then spoke carefully. I am the head of an organization that controls several legitimate businesses throughout the city, including the Obsidian. We also control certain less legitimate enterprises, gambling primarily, some loan operations, protection services. The clinical way he described his criminal empire should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself appreciating his honesty, however belated. And the charges against you? I asked, orchestrated by rivals, executed by corrupted officials, but not entirely without foundation. His mouth curved in a humorless smile. No one in my position has entirely clean hands, Eleanor. I thought of his hands. Strong, elegant, capable of violence, but also of surprising gentleness when holding mine, when touching my face, when helping Lily build her block tower. So, what happens now? I asked, echoing the question I'd posed to Sophia earlier. My lawyers will negotiate, he explained. Evidence will mysteriously become compromised. Witnesses will reconsider their statements. There was a matter-of-factness to his tone. This isn't my first legal entanglement, though it is the most serious. And if the negotiations fail, something flickered in his eyes, not exactly fear, but a cold, calculating look. Then I face a significant prison sentence. The full weight of his situation, of our situation, settled over me. This man, who had entered my life so suddenly and transformed it so completely, might disappear just as abruptly. Adrian, I began, unsure what I even wanted to say. I don't know if I can. He interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. What I'm offering hasn't changed. The apartment, Lily's education, your financial security. All of it is arranged regardless of what happens to me. I don't want your money, I said, a sudden flare of anger rising unexpectedly. I wanted what? He pressed when I faltered. What did you want from me, Eleanor? The question pierced through my confusion, forcing me to confront the truth. I wanted you, I whispered. Just you. Adrian's expression transformed. The careful mask slipped to reveal raw vulnerability. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching mine. You have me in whatever capacity remains possible. I stared at his outstretched hand, understanding the choice before me. I could walk away now, protect myself and Lily from further entanglement with his complicated, dangerous world. Or I could accept what he offered, not just the material security, but the connection we'd formed, imperfect and fragile though it might be. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. I need you to promise me something, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to face this, whatever this is, I need honesty. You have my word, he replied, his dark eyes solemn. No more secrets between us. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, bail hearings, and emotional upheaval. Adrian was finally released on an exorbitant bail with restrictions that included electronic monitoring and limited movement. The legal battles were far from over, but at least he was out of detention. During those weeks, Lily and I had moved into the brownstone apartment. I told myself it was practical. The security system and doorman provided protection I suddenly felt we needed. But the truth was more complex. Being surrounded by spaces Adrian had chosen, had prepared for us, somehow made his absence more bearable. When he was finally able to visit, Lily ran to him without hesitation, throwing her arms around his legs with a joyful Adrian that brought an unguarded smile to his face. He crouched to her level, listening with genuine interest as she excitedly showed him her new room, her new toys, the small garden where she'd planted sunflower seeds. Later, after Lily was asleep, we sat in the living room, the city lights glimmering beyond the windows. Adrian looked both out of place and perfectly at home in this setting. The elegant furnishings suited him. Yet, there was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there before his arrest. My lawyers are optimistic, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. The case against me is already beginning to unravel. Because of your influence? I asked, with no judgment in my tone, just a desire to understand. Partly, he met my eyes, honoring our promise of truth, but also because much of the evidence was fabricated or obtained illegally. Even legitimate law enforcement can't build a case on such foundations. I nodded, accepting this reality of his world. Over the past weeks, I'd done considerable thinking about moral absolutes, about the gray areas most lives actually occupied, my own included. What happens if you're cleared? I asked. Everything goes back to how it was before? Adrian studied me, his expression thoughtful. No, some things must change. He set down his glass, leaning forward. I've been transferring more operations to legitimate businesses for years. This situation has accelerated that timeline. You're leaving behind the illegal activities? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Transitioning, he corrected. Gradually. Some ventures are more complicated to unwind than others. But yes, eventually. His eyes held mine intently. Not because I've suddenly developed conventional morality, Eleanor, but because I've found something worth protecting more than my empire. The weight of his words, the implication behind them, made my heart race. Adrian, I love you. He said it simply, directly, the declaration hanging in the air between us. I didn't want to initially, but I do. For a moment, I couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions I'd been holding at bay. This is crazy, I finally managed. We barely know each other, don't we? He moved to sit beside me, taking my hands in his. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you'd sacrifice everything for Lily without hesitation. I know you're intelligent, compassionate, stubborn. A small smile touched his lips. I know you sing under your breath when you think no one's listening. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar, that you sleep curled on your right side, that you're afraid of thunderstorms but pretend not to be for Lily's sake. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. When did you notice all that? From the beginning. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I see you, Eleanor. All of you. And you still want this, us? I gestured vaguely, encompassing the complicated reality of our situation. Even with everything happening, especially now, his expression was more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. What I feel for you, for Lily, it's become my anchor, my reason to fight, to change, to become something better than what I've been. In that moment, looking into his eyes, I recognized the truth I'd been fighting. I loved him, too, despite the complications, despite the danger, despite the uncertain future. Or perhaps because of all those things, because he had shown me strength and tenderness in equal measure, had offered protection without demanding subjugation, had seen value in me when I'd forgotten my own worth. I love you too, I whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. The months that followed weren't easy. Adrian's legal battles continued, though gradually, as he had predicted, the case against him weakened. I returned to work, not at the Obsidian, but at a small cafe near Lily's new school, a job that allowed me to be home when she finished classes. Adrian divided his time between his business obligations, legal meetings, and us. He never stayed overnight when Lily was home, careful to maintain appropriate boundaries as we navigated this new relationship. But he became a steady presence in our lives, helping with homework, teaching Lily to play chess, joining us for dinner most evenings. Gradually, cautiously, we built something that felt like family. Not perfect, not conventional, but real and solid and ours. One evening, nearly a year after our first encounter at the Obsidian, Adrian took me to dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor. As we finished our meal, he reached across the table for my hand. The last charges were dismissed today, he said, his expression a complex mixture of relief and determination. The case is closed. Joy surged through me. That's wonderful news. There's more. He hesitated, something uncharacteristically uncertain in his manner. The restructuring of my businesses is nearly complete. Everything above board, legitimate. A wry smile touched his lips. Mostly legitimate. I returned his smile, understanding that change, real change, came in degrees. I'm proud of you. His expression softened. There's one more thing I want to change. He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. One more step toward becoming the man you deserve. My breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Elegant and understated rather than ostentatious, perfectly aligned with my taste. Eleanor Bennett, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Will you marry me? Time seemed to suspend as I looked at the ring, at his face, at the future he was offering. Not a perfect future. There would always be shadows in Adrian's past, always be elements of his world that operated in gray areas, but a future built on truth, on mutual respect, on the love that had grown between us despite every obstacle. Yes, I answered, certainty filling me completely. Yes, I will. Later that night, as we stood in the garden behind our brownstone, Adrian's arms around me as we gazed at the stars visible through the city's light pollution, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From a vulnerable single mother and a powerful, isolated man to partners, to family, to a future neither of us could have imagined that first night at the Obsidian. What are you thinking? Adrian murmured against my hair. That sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations. I replied, turning in his embrace to face him. His smile, rare and genuine, warmed me from within. And this is just the beginning, he promised, sealing the words with a kiss that tasted of certainty, of belonging, of home. Safe in his arms, with Lily sleeping peacefully upstairs, I knew he was right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The former waitress and the reformed Mafia boss, building a life that defied expectations but fulfilled our deepest needs. Love, family, and the courage to become more than our past had prepared us to be.